Hello everybody, I'm Kide from Automotive Technology Department. Welcome to today's video. Today I'll try to present about overhauling manual transmission. If you remember, in last two videos, I was focused on presenting servicing, service and tests performed on manual transmission, diagnose on manual transmission. If you remember, the test is performed on like road test. During road test, I put some remark how or before you perform road test, how you must obey the rules and you must know the functionality of the vehicle system. And based on the road test, we can put or fill some checklist and we can specify that checklist problems in one report sheet. And by having that report sheet, we must recognize that or diagnosis that whether the problem is in a specific gear, during a speed difference, during cornering, or after replacement of part. So by specifying that, we can assure that the test or I mean the problem is fixed on the vehicle or it requires overhauling of manual transmission. So in this video, I will cover how we overhaul the manual transmission. In the first part, we'll try to see that transmission overhaul is like a comprehensive repair service that involves completely disassembling the transmission, examining each component, and repairing or replacing any part that are damaged or no work. If you see this part, uh, initially, if the problem is not fixed by uh, on vehicle servicing or adjustment of parts like clutch adjustment by adding some oil or gearbox oil, by adjusting linkage mechanism for selector lever. If the problem is not fixed by this one, we'll proceed to overhauling. That means when you say overhauling means we will remove the gearbox from the system or from the vehicle and we will disassemble each and every parts for the sake of inspection or examination of each component. So this like overhauling is done after the problem that cannot be resolved by servicing and adjustment. We must assure this one because we must not rush for overhauling. Overhauling is a very comprehensive repair or it requires too much resource, too much time and energy. So we must initially assure that when will be the overhauling is required. To answer this question, just our transmission requires overhauling, like when your vehicle experiences major transmission problems. For example, if there is slippage, mostly the slippage is correlated with clutch problem. And to replace or check the clutch, we should remove the gearbox if we have grinding problem, grinding noise or shifting issue. If these things are happened, we must overhaul our gearbox system. Uh, the problem are usually caused by, for example, sleep grinding, shifting issue mostly happened by the internal problem or internal damage of transmission, such as worn gear, bearings, or clutch problem. As I expressed before, mostly the clutch problem is related with slippage, mostly, but the adjustment will matter on grinding. So if the problem is internal, we will proceed to the overhauling. When you see the overhauling task will include removal. When we say removal, initially we should remove the gearbox from the vehicle or removing the gearbox system from our car. When you say disassemble, we requires just rem ja, just unmount, or when you say disassemble, which means we need to remove each and every part for the sake of examination. Like we will remove the transmission housing, the extension housing, the retainer, the bearings, gears for the further examination or inspection. So after we disassemble and clean each part, we will proceed to the inspection. So in this inspection, sometimes we will perform visual inspection and instrumental inspection will be performed. And during inspection time, we should consider that, or we must compare the manufacturer recommendation. Again, after we perform inspection and based on the inspection, we should repair or replace some part. After that, we will assemble properly the parts or the gearbox. Then we will install the gearbox to the vehicle. This is what we are looking in these videos. When you say removal or at the phase of removal, we must assure something. First, before removal from the vehicle, we should disconnect battery terminals because when we remove some electric part, it will create short circuit. To prevent that, initially we should remove the battery negative terminal, and better if we disconnect both. The next one, identify your gearbox type. So mostly every gearbox will have different identity or ID, like identification code. Mostly this identification code we know in the engine part, vehicle identification number. Some of the gearbox will be included in the VIN, but in most design of gearbox, we will get such kind of numbers. If you observe these numbers, this number express different things from the gearbox, like transmission assembly number, build date and code. It indicates month, day, year, shift number. So this part will shows the detailed thing about our gearbox, the serial number, the identification number, and service repair code. So mostly this one will be located under the extension housing, which is the location of 10 o'clock to screw. So we can initially find it's not a location for our gearbox. It depends on the types, but initially we should know this one, and we must have a manual before proceed to any task. So to having that manual or to check the service information before disassembling the transmission, just we must know or identify the our transmission. Next, to transmission, sometimes the transmission case can be damaged by pressing a bearing in the wrong direction. So we must consider this one. If we press by hydraulic press or pull or something in wrong position, it will create another damage. So the next phase is the disassembly. Uh, Simply disassembly means removing parts from the housing. In the first one, when you say removal, just by having some supporting equipment like transmission jack, we remove from the vehicle. Next, we disassemble each and every component part. For example, initially we should remove backup lights, switch, sometimes the speed sensors with or wheel speed or ABS speed sensor, speedometer, driving gear, something like that. Mostly in most disassembly of parts, initially we should disconnect the electrical part, and if there is too much, by the way, for the manual gearbox, it doesn't have any too much complicated wiring system. But if the wiring system is complicated, we must put some tag on that part. Next, remove clutch housing, shift lever retainer, as you observe here. Just we must clutch the retainer, the clutch housing part, this one, and the shift lever retainer, and the restriction pin. This restriction pin is which restrict, or we call this one shift level system, which supports or make neutral always the selector lever, which makes on 0 always. The next one is just we need to remove the front bearing retainer, because initially we disconnect the bell housing or clutch housing. Then we should remove this bearing retainer. Then we should remove the snap ring for the input shaft bearings and the counter shaft bearing. After that, simply we can separate the housing and the intermediate plate. If you observe, this one is the intermediate, I mean the intermediate plate, sorry. This will interconnect both I mean the extension housing and the main housing part. So we should remove this one, and we should mount this intermediate plate in a vice for the proper working, or for the proper operation. Next, remove the locking ball and spring. If you remember this locking and ball and spring, like this ball and spring are mostly used for fall detent mechanism. In different design, you will obtain different number of detent mechanism. That means these are simply spring-loaded balls, which prevents the gear shift from out of gear after we select the preferred speed. So this we should remove this one all. uh, don't don't forget to collect the balls properly, because most of the time these balls are missing. If these balls are missing after while we mount without these balls, what will happen is our gearbox will have uh, shift, I mean our gearbox will have out of gear while we are driving, mostly when we accelerate or decelerate. Next, we should remove shift forks, shafts, then the reverse idler gear and the speedometer should be removed. I will show you in next part, or the removal of the reverse idler gear. Next, as you observe, after we remove the parts like the balls and the speedometers. Next, we should remove the counter bearing. So the counter bearing, before we remove the counter bearing, we should remove the snap rings, and then we should use some puller, as you observe. By having some puller, and after we remove the snap ring, we should, or we can simply remove the parts sequentially. So at this time, what we need to assure is, initially, don't forget to remove the snap ring before using the puller. The next, our puller must be put at the center, and it must be put at 180 degree. So we should just imagine that it must be at the half part of, or it must equally just divide the gears to have proper. If it is misaligned, sometimes it's hard to remove. The next part, uh, we should remove the reverse gear. Initially, as I told you, we should remove the reverse gear snap ring, and we can use puller to remove the snap ring. We can use some screwdrivers. This sometimes this screwdriver is we can use two screwdrivers, or we can use snap ring remover for this purpose. Next, uh, after we remove, let's see what parts are included in this part. For this, for the understanding of the parts, it's better to use exploded view and realistic view of this part. As you observe here, different parts are observed: the speed gears, the counter shafts, the synchronizer assembly here, and the forks and the rail. These are parts which will be the bearings, which will be mounted in the gearbox. If you see parts most focus on the gear shifting mechanism, the shift fork shafts. Can you see this interlock pin which prevents the engagement of two gears simultaneously? And you see the interlock pin for different rails. And we have also here uh, like the shaft stoppers, the snap rings, the spring, which the bearing will be split. We have different types of bearing. You see, needle roller bearing here. This one is splitter type bearing. Snap ring we will obtain everywhere. So always we should not forget to put every parts like the clips after we put the parts in appropriately. So uh, we have different shafts, the main shaft, the counter shaft, the input shaft, so the idler shaft we will obtain here. So we must assure that the parts are properly put. Don't forget the small parts included in this portion. When you see one by one each component, the first one is input shaft. Input shaft. Uh, if if we say input shaft means this part will be received some power from the gearbox, and after it receive power from the gearbox, let's see one by one. Input shaft. So when you see the components of input shaft, this is the snap ring which supports the bearing over here. It's supported with two bearings, small and the big bearing here. This smooth part is supported in like mostly in crankshaft or flywheel, and this blade is connected with the friction disc. And in this part, we will go to mostly needle roller bearing and or roller bearing. So this bearing supports the main shaft, and internally we will obtain another bearing which connects the main shaft and the input shaft. So this is one thing. This synchronizer is used for direct drive synchronizer. The next one is the output shaft. The output shaft, the components of output shaft or the components of the main shaft are, as you observe here, the sleeve for different gears, like for direct drive, third gear, first gear, second gear are included. In this part, what I want to put remark is this smooth part is supported by bearing with this gear. So if you see, we will have here bearing, and this internal part is smooth, and the shaft is connected in this smoothest part. So the spline that you observe here is it connecting with directly with the clutch hub. So the target of this clutch hub is it connect with the shaft, the output shaft, then externally with the hub sleeve, then the hub sleeve which connects this clutch hub and the speed gear in between the synchronizer mediate the speed. So here we should check all parts, including these bearings, these like inner race parts for this bearing, also the flange, the shaft, the gears, the synchronizer key, the synchronizer assembly. They will inspect individually. So you must know in this part when you remove which parts are interconnected internally. The next one is parts of the counter shaft. The next part is counter gear or counter shaft and reverse idler gear component. If you observe here, uh, the reverse idler gear will have its own parts like this. The idler gear, you see, the idler shaft, the snap ring, So these are the parts we are obtained. Sometimes if we want to order, we must use this order number for different parts. And the counter shaft is obviously it's casted. These gears are casted or they are not easily detached from the shaft. And uh, they are one unit here. The next one is the parts which interconnect with this one or connect in this part is like the synchronizer ring, the fifth speed. So this one is, as you observe at this end, the fifth speed is interconnected on this system. So this is one thing. The next one or the next part is extension housing. This extension housing, which includes all parts of the unit. So that means this extension housing will have just the external interconnecting mechanism, the shift level system, uh, just it includes all part of the gearbox. So we should also uh, just remember the parts which are mounted on this all, including the oil receiver pipe and the boots mounted at the top part. So this is one critical thing. Uh, in the next video, we'll try to see inspection of each parts. So you'll obtain the inspection of a part in the next video. Thank you for your attention. If you have any comment, suggestion, just you are welcome with this contact address. Have a nice time. Bye bye.